Hey guys, so today we're going to talk about two-step equations. Two-step equations are the same concept as one step, we just have a few more steps that we have to solve. So we are going to look at example 1. We have 6 equals negative 3x minus 6. So the first step tells us that if our equation has parentheses, does it have parentheses to distribute our like terms? This equation does not have parentheses, so I'm going to choose no, and I'm going to follow my arrow down. The second step says, does it have a constant on the same side as the variable? Now remember, a constant is a number that just stands alone. It doesn't have a variable with it. So we're going to locate the constant that is on the same side of the variable and move it to the opposite side and change it to its inverse, then simplify. So we originally had 6 equals negative 3x minus 6. This minus 6 is our constant, so we're going to do the inverse to that. So we're going to add that to both sides of the equal sign. Because what we do to one side, we have to do the other. Because of additive inverse, that's going to be eliminated. 6 plus 6 is 12 equals negative 3x. Now, step 3 says, do we have a coefficient? A coefficient is a number in front of the variable, and we do. So we're going to move the coefficient to the opposite side of the equation by doing the inverse and then simplifying. So in this step, we are down to 12 equals negative 3x. We're going to divide this 3, and we're going to take that sign with it. Because you'll see in the next step, we don't want that variable to be negative. Negative 3 divided by 3 just leaves us with that 1x. 12 divided by negative 3 is negative 4. Now, our next step asks us if we have a positive variable, and we do have a positive variable. You should have a positive variable that equals a number. If not, we're going to have to move that negative sign from the variable to the number. So just go ahead and divide that negative with it when you are in this step. Now, step 5, we can check our answer. So we're going to substitute the negative 4 into our equation because we know that x equals negative 4, so we can substitute that for x. Negative 3 times negative 4 is positive 12. So we get 6 equals 12 minus 6. Now 12 minus 6 does equal 6, so this equation does work out. We can always check your work. Now let's look at example 2. So we're going to start over with step 1. It says, do we have parentheses to distribute or like terms? We do have like terms right here. So this is when we're going to use what we know about expressions. 5x plus 2x gives me 7x, and I'm going to keep everything else the same. So if we have parentheses to distribute or like terms, we distribute and combine those like terms. Now, question 2 asks if we have a constant on the same side as the variable, and we do. So we're going to have to get that constant on the different side of the variable. So now we have negative 12 equals 2 plus 7x. I'm just bringing down the problem from here. So 2 is my constant. It's a positive 2 or being added, so I'm going to subtract 2 from both sides of the equation. 2 minus 2 is 0, so that's eliminated. Negative 12 minus 2. Same sign, I add and keep my sign. So I get negative 14 equals 7x. Now, question 3 says, do I have a coefficient, which is a number in front of the variable? And I do, so I'm going to do the inverse of that coefficient. The coefficient is being multiplied to that x, So the inverse of multiplication is division. So I'm going to rewrite my problem in this step, and I'm going to divide both sides by that 7. 7 divided by 7x divided by 7 just leaves me with that 1x. Negative 14 divided by 7 is negative 2. Now, question 4 says, do I have a positive variable? And I do. There's not a negative in front of that. So we've just got negative 2 equals x, or x equals negative 2. Now, our next question says, is this correct? So we're going to substitute this negative 2 into our original equation. So we've got negative 12 equals 2 plus 5 times negative 2 plus 2 times negative 2. I'm going to do multiplication first. This gives me negative 10 plus negative 4. Now, I'm going to add from left to right. 2 plus negative 10 is negative 8. Negative 8 plus negative 4 gives me negative 12. So negative 12 does equal negative 12, and it does check out. Our answer is correct. Now I'm going to go to example 3. Question 1 says, do I have parentheses to distribute or like terms? And the answer is yes. So I'm going to distribute this negative 3 to everything in parentheses. Negative 3 times 4r is negative 12r. Negative 3 times negative 8 is positive 24. And we get that equals negative 36. Now, question 2 asks if I have a constant on the same side of the variable. And that answer is yes. So I'm going to bring this problem down. All right, this is my constant that's on the same side as the variable. It's being added, so I'm going to subtract 24 from both sides of my equation. I bring down my negative 12r. Positive 24 minus 24 gives me 0. And I've got negative 36 minus 24. Now, if I have the same signs, I can add and keep the signs. So I've got 36 plus 24 gives me 60, and I keep that negative. Now, step 3 asks if we have a coefficient, which is a number in front of the variable. I do have a coefficient, so I'm going to divide by that coefficient, or do the inverse of that coefficient in step 3. My coefficient is this negative 12. It's being multiplied to that r. So I'm going to divide both sides by negative 12. Negative 12 divided by negative 12 just gives me r. And I get r equals negative 60 divided by negative 12 is positive 5. So I get that r equals 5. Question 4 asks if our variable is positive, and that is yes. So we have that r equals 5. Now, step 5 wants us to check to see if it's correct. So we're going to substitute our 5 for that r. Now, we're going to do parentheses first. So we've got 4 times 5, which gives me 20. We've still got work to do in the parentheses. 20 minus 8 gives me positive 12. Now we've got negative 3 times 12, which gives me negative 36, and negative 36 does equal negative 36. So our answer is correct. So I really want you to use this flow chart when you're going through your notes. Now, I will show you a few more problems that's going to be on your solving equations practice problems. But first, I want you to look at the bottom of your guided notes, and it's got a few phrases or a few things that we need to know. So it says that inverse operations are operations that are opposite each other. So inverse operations are the ones that are opposite of each other. The inverse of addition is subtraction. The inverse of subtraction is addition. The inverse of multiplication is division. And the inverse of division is multiplication. Now, anytime you move something, whoops, forgot my space. You move something, I'm obviously trying to type too fast. Anytime you move something from one side of an equation to the other, you must do the same thing to both sides. So same thing to both sides is our key right here. All right. Now, last but not least, the whole point of solving these equations is to isolate the variable. All right, is to isolate the variable, which means to get the variable by itself. So now I want to work a few example problems with you. And if you get confused on why I'm doing what I'm doing, go back and watch the guided notes part and follow that flow chart. So right here I have negative 3m minus 6 equals 18. The first thing I'm going to do is isolate my constant or move my constant to try to isolate my variable. Negative 6 plus 6 gives me 0, so I have negative 3m equals 18 plus 6. So 18 plus 6 gives me 24. Now I've got to get my coefficient by itself. So I'm going to divide both sides by negative 3. Negative 3m divided by negative 3 just leaves me with m. 24 divided by negative 3 gives me negative 8. All right, let's look at one more. Suppose I have 15 plus n over 2 equals 20. Now, the first thing I've got to do is separate my constant. So I'm going to subtract 15 from both sides because 15 is a positive value or it's being added. 15 minus 15 is 0. So I get n divided by 2 or n over 2. And 20 minus 15 gives me 5. Now, in fractions, that's pretty much the same as division. We've learned that. So this is like saying n divided by 2. So the opposite of division is multiplication. Okay? So when we do that, that's going to go away. And we're going to get n equals 5 times 2, which gives me 10. Now I want you to look at one that has a fraction. So if I have the problem 1/2 x minus 2 equals 9, the first thing I'm going to do is distribute this 1/2 to everything in parentheses. 1/2 times x equals 1/2 x. Half of negative 2 is negative 1. And I get that all of that equals 9. Now I'm going to have to get the constant over to the other side, so I'm going to do the inverse. It's being subtracted, so I'm going to add 1 to both sides. That goes away, and I get 1/2 x equals 10. Now 1/2 is being multiplied to that x, so the inverse of multiplication is division. So I've got 10 divided by 1/2. When I divide fractions, I keep, change, flip. 10 times 2 is 20 over 1, which just gives me 20. So in this problem, x equals 20.